Welcome back to Musicians Edition. Today, we continue our look at Mitchell Peters' Intermediate Snare Drum Studies, and we're going to look at Roman numeral number 9, okay? So we talked about rolls and how to place those buzzes and how to control those buzzes with our back fingers. So now we're going to take that concept and apply it to written music on the page. Okay, so throughout this exercise, we're going to use what we call a 16th note roll pulse. Okay, and just what that means is the rate at which we are moving our buzz strokes is going to be in the form of 16th notes. Okay, so if we think about it in terms of one beat, right? If we were going to play 16th notes for one beat, we would play 1 E and right? Now, if we were going to roll for one beat with a 16th note roll pulse, we would buzz 1 E and right? Just like that. Cool? So thinking 1 E and if I want to roll for one beat, I would go 1 E and right? And that's going to apply throughout this piece no matter how long or short the rolls are, okay? For instance, you have some half note rolls, right? And again, that's the open note head with the stem with the 3 slashes through it, right? So when you see a half note roll, you're going to roll for 2 beats, but your pulse is going to be 1 E and 2 E and right? So when I see a half note with 3 slashes through the stem, I'm thinking 1 E and 2 E and then I'm just going to buzz all of those strokes. 1 E and 2 E and yeah? Okay, same idea when I see an 8th note with slashes through the stem. I'm just thinking the space of 1 beat, or 1/8 note, excuse me, which is half of a beat, right? I want to put however many 16th notes will fit there into that note, right? So we're thinking if it's half a beat, we have space for 2 16th notes, right? So we're thinking and, right? Or and then just buzzing all of those, and, right? You have one of those at the very beginning of this piece. You see we play 3 regular 8th notes and then 1 rolled 8th note, right? So we're going to think 1 and 2 and 1, and then we're just going to buzz the and-does. 1 and 2 and 1. Okay? There are some quarter note rolls, right? In those we're thinking 1 E and right? 1 E and the space of that. All right? There are some half notes tied to each other. In that case, we'll think 1 E and 2 E and 1 E and 2 E and until the half notes, until we run out of half notes, right? Okay. The other tricky rhythm in this piece comes in measure 5. So in measure 5, you see we have a single 8th note on beat 1, right? An 8th note all by itself. Then we have a dotted quarter note right after that with slashes through it. So that tells us we need to roll a dotted quarter note, right? So let's think really carefully here. A dotted, when we put a dot on a note, we're going to add half of that note's original value to the note, right? So a quarter note gets 1 beat, right? If we think what's half of a quarter note, that would be half of a beat. So let's add that to the original quarter note. Now we have 1.5 beats, okay? So if a dotted quarter note is 1.5 beats, we're thinking there's space for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 16th notes, yeah? So now we're thinking 1 for the 8th note, right? And then and 2 E and for the rest of the measure, right? 1 and 2 E and then we're just going to roll all of those 16th notes, right? 1 and 2 E and 1, right? You have 2 of those in a row in measure 5 and measure 6, right? So we have 1 and 2 E and 1 and 2 E and 1, okay? Very good. So one more point before we kind of dig into this piece. You'll see a number of ties, right? Or the curved line that connects 2 notes. You'll see several of those in this piece. Now, it works a little bit differently in snare drum music than it does for other instruments, right? So if you see 2 notes that are tied together and they're both marked as rolls, what that tells us to do is to continue rolling through those notes, right? Now, if you see a tie that comes from a rolled note into a not rolled note, right? That tells us to release the roll on that note and not to roll it, right? So a couple of examples of that would be if we look at the second line down, the fourth measure and the fifth measure, right? We see two half notes, half note in measure 4 with a roll, half note in measure 5 with a roll, right? That's going to tell us to roll for two half notes, right? Or four total beats, right? Now back in the first line, going from the end of measure 1 to the beginning of measure 2, we have a tie that comes out of a roll into an unrolled note, okay? So what that tells me to do is then to roll until I get to the note that is tied to the rolled notes, right? So what I mean is 1 and 2 and 1, okay? So you see we're not rolling the note that isn't marked as a roll, okay? Fair enough? That can be a little bit confusing, so I just wanted to touch on that point, okay? All right, well, let's try this piece in a nice slow tempo, right? And we'll kind of, I'll talk you through it as we go. 1 and 2 and ready and go. And 1 and 2 and 1 and 2, roll 1 and 2 and a 1 and 1 and a 2 and a 1 and a 2 and a 1, 2 and 2. 1, 2 and 1 and a 2 and 1 and a 2 and 1, 2. 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and a 2 and 1 and a 2 and rest. 1 and 2 and two and 1, 2, 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and rest. 1, 2, 1, rest. 1 E and a 2 E and 1, rest. Rest and 1 E and a 2 E and a 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 rest and 1. 3 measures. 1, 2, 1 and a 2 E and a 1. All right? Very good. So there's one type of roll, or one type of like discrepancy here, right? Sometimes we'll have two rolls in a row that are tied together, and sometimes we'll have two rolls in a row that are not tied together, okay? Now, different people will tell you different things, but you kind of have to start interpreting the music at that point, right? So if there's a tie, it probably is going to tell us to go ahead and roll all the way until the next note, right? If there's not a tie, it's probably going to tell us that maybe the composer is looking for a little bit of space between the rolls, right? Maybe not. Maybe it's just a misprint, right? So that's where you have to, really be a musician and think through, try to get inside the head of the composer and think, what was the composer trying to tell me to do there? If you're playing with a band or with an orchestra or something like that, then you need to think through context and what is the rest of the group doing, and how does what I'm doing relate to them? And that will help you make that decision, right? For now, you kind of just have to sort of, make as good of a guess as you can, right? And so what I'm thinking here is that if the rolls are not tied together, that probably means that the composer wants a little bit of space between those notes. So what I'm doing is just trying to lift my hands and then start rolling again, right? For instance, when we have a couple of quarter notes in a row, I'm thinking 1 E and a 2 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a, right? With just a little bit of a lift. Just a little bit of space between them. Okay. Again, you can kind of interpret that however you will. It's good to just go ahead and practice putting space between them, right? Especially since in this piece, the composer did put a bunch of ties coming out of rolls into the next notes, but there are some that don't have them, right? So that probably tells us that, Mitchell Peters is looking for a little space there. It's also good to just go ahead and practice it with some space. That way you just get comfortable playing it that way. Okay? All right, let's try this again at a faster tempo. 1 and 2 and ready and go and. 1 and 2 E and 1 and 2 and 1 2 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1. Two and 1, 2, 1 and 2 and 1. Rest. 1, 2, 1, 2. Rest. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1 E and a 2 E and a. Rest. 1 and 2 and. And thank you so much for joining me today, and I'll see you next time.